right? You think about those men in your lives that poured into you when necessary. And I know that when I was in seminary, and I've talked about this a little bit before, one of the papers I wrote and did some research on was the effect of fatherhood on the household, the effect of dad on the household and what it carries. Because there's this adage, right? And the world tries to discredit this. If you look at what the world shows for fatherhood, it does a disservice to the truth of what fatherhood is, right? If you look at what the world says, modern television, media, things like that about dads, typically if you watch on television, the dad is sort of the bumbling character, doesn't get things right, just sort of is there and exists. He's sort of a comedic relief figure. Doesn't know what's going on, tends to be aloof, right? Or he's absent. Or he's just absent and he's not there. And so that is sort of the media adage of what fatherhood is. And the reality is, and for what I believe, and the reality is that the world is very much so trying to discredit fatherhood. Because true fatherhood not only changes the life of the children that are under that father, but will change the generations going forward. What the numbers tell us, as far as looking at modern numbers and things like that, is this. When dad steps up into the role of being the spiritual leader of the household, when dad steps into that role that was designed by God for him, we see that the family becomes involved in the church, not just involved, but becomes Christ followers, people that are Jesus-centered at almost an 80% regularity when dad takes on that role of spiritual leadership. That number falls off to closer to 50% if mom takes on that role. Not saying mom's not important, we just see the numbers that when dad takes on that role, it holds power. And in researching for this project that I did when I was in seminary, of course this has been a few years ago that I wrote this paper, what we saw was this. For young men, the role of a father cannot be discounted. For the role of a young man, fathers teach them who they are supposed to be as they get older. It gives them the example of what they would like to be or what they don't want to be. Unfortunately, for some of those that have the father they don't want to be, they fall into that role because no one steps into that role to show them what they need to be. It's even worse for the young ladies. What we see for young ladies is this. The absent father syndrome, as we'll call it, absent fatherhood in the life of a young woman leads to multiple things. Increased drug use, depression, things like that. All of the things you don't want to think about and talk about. But when a father has a role in the child's, in the daughter's life, those numbers fall off dramatically. I know for me as an example, from what I'm trying to do with my own daughters, is I try to show them an example of who they should look for. And we see this with young women when they have dads in their life. A lot of time it's whoever the men are that come into their lives, they have to measure up to who? You got to measure up to dad. Right? They got to measure up. Are you a person who's like, are you going to take care of me? Are you going to do these things? Are you that? Are you moldable? Are you seeking Christ? Are you doing these things? Right? And in the same way, in the absence of a dad, they will seek out a father-ish figure and do that. And so the idea of fatherhood should not be discounted in your life. If you have been blessed enough to be a dad, whether biologically or choosing, and someone choosing you to take on that role, it's a job that should be taken seriously. And as we think and look in Proverbs chapter 1, it says this, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and being instructed, for understanding and insightful sayings. So we just think about this for a minute. So how do we then, if we decide, yes, I understand the role of being a father, I want to be better at it, where do I go for instruction? Well, we go to the ultimate example of fatherhood, which is God the Father. The ultimate example of what a father should be comes from Him. And we think about those attributes of God. What was He? Right? He's merciful, He's gracious, but when necessary, He will correct His children. Right? If you're a believer in this room, has God ever had to correct you? The answer is yes. Is that enjoyable? And the answer is no. Correction is usually not enjoyable in the midst of the correction, In the aftermath of the correction, the enjoyment comes from understanding that someone loved and cared about you enough to do what? Make you be different. Right? To make you be different. And in my kids' lives, they know that they're getting that all the time, right? My job as your dad is to show you who Jesus is, right? To point you towards the Lord, and then to make you a decent human, right? To have you know what you need to know before you get out of the household and you're inflicted upon the world. At school, I tell these kids all the time, right? It's a little different. I try to pour into them as much as I can, but the reality is, right, I don't have them all the time. Give them as much as I can, but I'm limited in that. And so the example for us is, what do we look at? What do we do as Christian men to be better fathers? Well, we need to be more like Jesus. Gracious, merciful, provide correction when necessary, but correction within reason. So we see, continuing verse 3, it says, for receiving wise instruction in righteousness, justice, and integrity, for teaching shrewdness to the inexperienced, knowledge and discretion to a young man, right? Or young woman, to the children underneath your tutelage. I know, and I lean on my kids a lot for examples, and sometimes it works, and sometimes they get annoyed with me. But I'm going to lean on Peyton once again today. And to her credit, right? We were shopping. And this was about a year ago, and she wanted some boots, right? And as we were going to look for boots, we went to the first place. And the first place we went was Boot Barn. And if you've ever tried to buy boots at Boot Barn, they are very proud of those things. Very proud of those things. And she found a pair of boots, and we fell in love with the boots. We wanted to get the boots. And I said, well, let's wait. Let's go check another store and see if we can find something a little less expensive but similar. So we happened down the road to the next Western store down the way, which is, of course, Cavender's. And we walk into Cavender's, and lo and behold, what do we find? The same boots. $70 cheaper. Right? And so it was one of those moments where, and it was a teachable moment, where so me as a dad, I'm like, cool, $70 cheaper, I'm excited. I saw a light bulb click in my kid's head that day. Right? One of these things, we talk about shrewdness or teaching and knowledge and discretion, that light bulb clicked in her that, hey, when I want something or need something, it might be worthwhile to do what? Look around. See if I can find it somewhere else. And as a girl, she just responded because she's like, we're shopping. We're going to multiple stores. Like, we're just, one of the things she likes to do. That's, you want to speak Peyton's language? Offer to take her on a shopping day, right? She's in, right? You tell her, hey, you come cut my grass for a month, I'll take you out shopping. She'll do it, right? She's in all the way. I'm telling you right now. But teaching that, how do we learn if someone doesn't teach us? Right? In the ways for me, when I think about my own life, my own testimony in this, that it took multiple people, multiple men that poured into me to teach me, and really probably older than I should have been when they poured these lessons into me. And you've heard me talk about these men. Lance, who was my youth minister, Dwayne Edwards, who I worked with at Highland Lakes, multiple people throughout my life in athletics, through athletic training and things like that, coaches that poured into me. Learning these lessons from men have been justified in telling me, you're not mine. I'm not biologically responsible for you. Go figure it out. But choosing as Christian men to say, hey, this guy needs to learn, and nobody else is going to teach him, so they took that role on. In the same way for you men sitting in here, you've probably had young men and young women in your lives that you've done that. These people that you knew needed to learn something, and somebody wasn't teaching them, so you stepped in to bridge that gap. Guess what? That makes you dad. Again, back to Peyton, a couple of weeks ago, we went out to eat after church, and we saw a kid we knew, a kid that had been in my class, working at a restaurant in San Antonio. And not long after we went to that restaurant, we got a text. And that text came to Peyton, and she said, hey, the friend is a girl, the friend said, hey, next time, make sure you bring our dad back so we can have lunch again. And this was a kid I just had for 1 year in my classroom. And we got along fine and enjoyed it, and she asked me a lot of questions. But that says something to you When a kiddo says that to your own kid, hey, bring our dad back. And it tells me what she's looking for. Right? It gives me the understanding that the next time I'm around her, I can pour a little bit more. I can push just a little bit more. Because she's going to respond. And we think about that for us. That's what God waits for from us. God waits for us to say that. To come to Him and say, I need you to teach me. I need you to pour into me so that I can be more like you, God, and less like the world, which very much wants to pour into us and make us be different. Verse 5 continues, it says, a wise man will listen and increase his learning. A discerning man will obtain guidance for understanding a proverb or a parable, the word of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. One of the things I try to do in my own life, and I tell my kids this, both my biological kids and my kids at school, is never stop learning. You should always learn. Always seek wisdom. Always seek instruction. Always seek those who know more than you and desire to sit under their tree of learning. Because the second you stop learning, you're going backwards. Always seek to learn new information. And the same thing with our walk with Christ. The second we begin to think that we have the entirety of Scripture figured out, we're lying to ourselves. We will study this book. The hope is you will study this book of Scripture for a lifetime, consistently learning new and different things up until the time you hear the words, welcome, good and faithful servant, come and take your rest. And at that point, the book is made complete to you. You understand it fully upon entering into heaven. And so we see what happens if we're not careful. Verse 8 picks it up. It says, listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and don't reject your mother's teaching. For they will be a garland of grace on your head and a gold chain around your neck. Now, remember here, this is a double-edged sword for this. While the children are being instructed to listen, and a lot of parents will lean on this, and I've heard parents that are not great will tell you, well, you got to honor me. I'm your father. I'm your mother. You have to honor me. Yeah, but that's a two-way street. The children are to honor the parents as the parents do what? Hold up their end and responsibility as believers. And so here we see that, right? It says, listen to your father's instruction. Don't reject your mother's teaching, because that father and that mother should be pointing their children towards God. And anybody in this room that's taking on that role as father or mother for anyone, that is your first and foremost job, is to point your children and those underneath you towards God. And if you're not doing that, stop. You have to do that first. No other teaching is going to matter. It doesn't matter if you teach them how to drive and how to save money and do retirement and pay their taxes and how to buy a house. None of that matters if they don't know Jesus first. Because all of that other stuff goes away. Their relationship with Jesus is the only thing that is eternal. So we see in verse 10, if we are following, pause for a second, if we are doing what we are supposed to be doing as fathers and mothers of God, then we see what happens in verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, don't be persuaded. If they say, come with us, let us set an ambush and kill someone. Let's attack some innocent person just for fun. Let's swallow them alive like shoals, still healthy as they go down to the pit. We'll find all kinds of valuable property and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us and we'll share all the money. Now you think about this, right? Your hope would be as a parent, if there is a child in your existence, in your sphere of influence, right, whether biological or not, that someone comes to your child and says, hey, let's go do all this stuff, you would hope that you have taught your child enough to say what? No, we're not doing that. That's wrong on so many levels. We should not be doing that. I watched Courtney slept. Mark Rober on YouTube, right? Science guy, if you ever watched him, does the glitter bombs. He's a really neat science channel if you get the chance to watch him. Speaks to my science nerd brain. I like his stuff. But yesterday, he posted a video about car thieves in the LA area. And he set up a car with cameras and ended up car getting stolen and a kid in it. And this kid, and he talked about it, for 4 hours, this kid drove around calling his friends in a stolen car, trying to convince his friends to come out with him and ride around in the stolen car with him. And for 4 hours, this kid's friends told him what? No, we're not doing that. That's dumb. We're not doing that. We're not getting in the car with you. Right? Which was a little hope. Right? Sad that the kid stole the car, but hope in the fact that all of his friends were like, no, you're an idiot. We're not doing that. We think about that. I thought about that along with this right here, that I hope that my kids, when I'm not around, will remember and know enough that when someone presents them with an opportunity that sounds good in the moment, because the kid on the phone that stole the car, hey guys, we're not going to get caught. We're just going to ride around and have fun. We're not going to get caught. We're not going to get caught. What this kid didn't realize is Mark Grover had put 6 cameras in the car. He didn't realize it until after he took the stolen car to his house, that there were cameras in it. And on top of the cameras, there were 24 GPS trackers in this car. I would hope that my children have enough sense that when they hear something like that, that they would go, that's dumb. That's not right. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. But where do they learn that? They learn it through us as men, fathers and mothers, teaching them the truth. But it is not just enough for us to tell them what the truth is and teach them. We must most importantly do what? We must be modelers of it, right? That sounds similar to what Jesus says later. It's not enough to be speakers and readers of the Word. We must also be doers of the Word. I can teach my kids what it means to be a Christian until I'm blue in the face. But if my life does not model what I am showing them, then I am just Charlie Brown's teacher, for those of you that have watched the movies, right? I am just womp, 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 womp. Because I am not modeling what I am teaching. We see verse 15. It says, my son, don't travel that road with them or set foot on their path, because their feet run towards trouble and they hurry to commit murder. It is foolish, but they set an ambush to kill themselves. They attack their own lives. Such are the paths of all who pursue gain dishonestly. It takes the lives from those who profit from it. The idea being that we know that ultimately those that do things they're not supposed to do, that eventually God will win in the end. Their consequences will come. But for me as a father, it is my job to teach not just my children, but the children that end up under my sphere of influence, that chasing the world leads to destruction. If you chase the world and everything in it, it will only destroy you. And the hope would be that as I teach that to my children, they would understand that. Then don't chase the world. But if I'm not going to chase the world, what am I going to chase? Chase Jesus. Will you get the riches that the world says should be given to everyone? Probably not. Will your life be easy and without struggle? Absolutely not. Will people not talk to you or ignore you or be rude to you because you're different than them? More than likely. But at the end of the day, at the end of all of it, I want to be there when you hear the words, welcome, good and faithful servant. Because if I'm not there, number one, I'm assured of my salvation. I know where I stand. But if I never see my children walk in and hear those words too, I have failed. Not just as a pastor, but most importantly as a father. I have failed. I want to stand at those gates. and embrace my children as they walk in and we spend eternity together. And I know some of you can be, that's not how it's going to be. I get that. It's my earthly vision of it, right? That is our job. My first and foremost responsibility as a father is to get to the point where I know upon my leaving this earth that it is simply a matter of time before my children are reunited with me in perfection for eternity. Which leads me to Proverbs 20, verse 7 says this: the one who lives with integrity is righteous. His children who come after him will be happy. My goal is not just to see my children walk through and hear the words, "Welcome, good and faithful servant." I want my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren and my great-great-grandchildren and all the generations after that to have that same opportunity. And I want, and my hope would be that they could look back and say, well, where did this start? It started here. It started with my dad. So I want my kids. It started with my dad. He poured into us. He loved us like Jesus. So the challenge for us in this room, men, is to be those dads. To be those dads, just not only to your biological children, grandchildren, to those in your sphere of influence, neighbors, family, friends. These young men will look up to you for instruction and encouragement. Pour into them the truth of the gospel. Yesterday, or what it was Friday night. Friday night, I was outside in the yard, and I looked next door, and my neighbor and his son were out there swinging golf clubs. And of course, the golf coach in me watched for a minute and said, I can help with this. Right? For those of you that don't know where we live in the Natalia School District. So I went and talked, their son's going to be a senior next year in Natalia. And I said, hey, you want a nickel's worth of free advice? And him and his dad were both like, yes, anything you're willing to teach us. Like, we want to learn. And so I sat with this young man and his dad for a minute and kind of showed dad. Dad showed the son. And I said, hey guys, anytime you see me out here, you come. And we'll swing a golf club, we'll talk, we'll just hang out. That young man's eyes, the son's eyes, lit up. He's got a dad. His dad's a good dad. His dad's home, takes care of him. They're doing stuff all the time. Great relationship. But that kid's eyes lit up because it's another man who's willing to pour into him for no reason other than just want to teach. Right? Because he goes, well, you go to Lytle, you work in Lytle. I'm going to play for Natalia. Why do you want to help me? Because I can. Right? What does it say about me if I'm like, no, I'm not helping you. You're going to play against me next year. No. I want to teach you. We need to be those kind of men that would look to those around us that, what does it gain me to help this guy? Right? The reality is, others would look at me and go, you're a fool. You're going to help this guy get better before you're about to play him. They're in your district this year. Right? That's foolish. It's irrelevant. If I'm able to help this kid and he does well and beats me, I still win. Because I did what I was called to do as a Christ follower. That is my first and foremost calling, to be the hands and feet of Jesus to my neighbors before anything else. And so for us, it's that. For you, that's the challenge, to be the hands and feet of Jesus to people that you don't get anything out of it other than just being helped. Look for those opportunities and pour into people that are desperately seeking for you to pour into them. With that in mind, let us pray. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for being the first and foremost example of fatherhood to us. God, I pray that as we leave out of here, that we would look to you for our teaching and for our growing and our understanding. And then as you teach and grow us, we would then pour into those around us. Not in just to our own children and grandchildren and nieces or nephews or whoever, God, but to those that live around us, to all of these kids that you, young men, young women, that you have put around us, that we would pour into them as you have poured into us. That we would show them your goodness and your mercy and your glory, and we would show them the truth of your gospel. God, I pray that as we walk out of here today, we realize that that calling starts now. That we would be the teachers and the encouragers and the men that you have called us to be.